The courtroom smelled of old wood and desperation, but Officer Daniel Ruiz thought he could smell justice too. He was wrong, hilariously, tragically wrong. At 24, Daniel was the kind of rookie cop who believed the badge on his chest made him invincible. Fresh out of the academy, with a buzz cut sharp enough to cut glass and a moral compass polished to a shine, he'd been assigned to patrol the gritty streets of Eastmore, a city where racial tensions simmered like a pot left too long on the stove. Eastmore wasn't just divided. It was fractured, split along lines of color, class, and history. Black, white, Latino, Asian, everyone claimed their corner, and trust was a currency nobody spent. Daniel, a second-generation Mexican-American, thought he could change that. He thought he could be the hero. It was a Tuesday morning when he arrested Marcus Tate, a black man in his 30s, for what Daniel called suspicious behavior outside a convenience store. Marcus had been leaning against a lamppost, scrolling his phone, when Daniel's patrol car rolled up. Something about Marcus's posture too casual, maybe, or the way his eyes flicked upset Daniel's instincts buzzing. "You got ID?" Daniel had asked, his voice clipped, authoritative. Marcus sighed, handed over his wallet and said, "Man, I'm just waiting for my sister." Daniel didn't buy it. He saw a threat, or maybe he just saw a chance to prove himself. Either way, Marcus ended up in cuffs, charged with loitering and resisting arrest after he dared to question why he was being hassled. Now, standing in courtroom 3B, Daniel was ready to make his case. He adjusted his uniform, the blue fabric stiff against his skin, and squared his shoulders. The room was packed, reporters, community activists, and curious locals all crammed into the pews. The air buzzed with whispers, and Daniel felt the weight of every stare. He wasn't just testifying, he was performing. This was his moment to show Eastmore that law and order still meant something, that he wasn't just another cop picking fights with the wrong people. Across the room, Judge Amara Coleman presided like a queen on her throne. At 42, she was a legend in Eastmore's legal circus, a black woman who'd clawed her way up from public defender to district judge, known for her razor-sharp mind and zero tolerance for nonsense. Her dark eyes scanned the room, missing nothing, and her presence seemed to anchor the chaos. Daniel didn't know much about her, but he'd heard the rumors. Tough, fair, but unforgiving if you crossed her. He figured he could handle her. After all, he was on the side of right. "Your Honor," Daniel began, his voice louder than necessary. This defendant was acting suspiciously, refusing to comply with lawful orders. I had reason to believe he posed a threat to public safety. He gestured toward Marcus, who sat at the defense table, his face a mask of quiet fury. Marcus's lawyer, a wiry woman named Lena Patel, scribbled notes, her pen moving like a scalpel. Judge Coleman raised an eyebrow, her expression unreadable. Officer Ruiz, clarify suspiciously. "What exactly did Mr. Tate do that warranted an arrest?" Daniel puffed out his chest. "He was loitering in a high-crime area, Your Honor. He didn't provide a clear explanation for his presence, and when I asked for compliance, he became belligerent." "Belligerent?" Lena Patel shot up, her voice sharp. "Your Honor, my client asked why he was being detained. That's not belligerence. That's a constitutional right." The gallery murmured, and Daniel felt a prickle of heat creep up his neck. He wasn't used to being challenged like this, not by a lawyer, not in front of a crowd. "He raised his voice," Daniel insisted, turning to the judge. "He was uncooperative, and I made a judgment call. That's my job." Judge Coleman leaned forward, her gaze piercing. "Your job, officer, is to uphold the law, not to invent it. Did Mr. Tate threaten you? Did he have a weapon?" Daniel hesitated. "No, Your Honor, but..." "Then what precisely made him a threat?" Her voice was calm, but it cut like a blade. Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you arrested a man for standing on a sidewalk. The crowd erupted gasps, whispers, a few muffled cheers. Daniel's face burned. He wasn't going to let this judge, this courtroom, make him look like a fool. "With all due respect, Your Honor," he said, his voice rising. "You weren't there. You haven't seen what I've seen on those streets. I've got families to protect, communities to serve, and I don't have the luxury of second-guessing every decision from a bench." The room went silent. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Daniel realized, too late, that he'd crossed a line. Judge Coleman's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, he thought he saw a flicker of amusement, or was it pity, in her expression. She reached into her robe, pulled out a small leather wallet, and flipped it open to reveal a badge. Not a judge's seal, but a police badge, weathered and scratched. The kind you earn through years of sweat and blood. "Officer Ruiz," she said, her voice low and steady. "Before you lecture me about the streets, you should know I walked them for 10 years. I wore that badge in places you've only read about in reports. So don't tell me what I haven't seen." The courtroom exploded. Reporters scribbled furiously, activists clapped, and Daniel stood frozen, his mouth dry as sand. He'd heard the stories. Judge Coleman had been a cop, one of the best, before she traded her badge for a gavel. But knowing it and feeling it were two different things. He'd just tried to school a woman who'd lived the life he was only beginning to understand. Lena Patel seized the moment. "Your Honor, this arrest was baseless, a clear case of racial profiling. My client was targeted for no reason other than the color of his skin, and Officer Ruiz's testimony confirms he acted on assumption, not evidence." Daniel wanted to argue, to defend himself, but his words were stuck, tangled in the weight of his mistake. He glanced at Marcus, who met his eyes with a look that wasn't anger, but something worse, disappointment. Like Daniel had failed a test he didn't even know he was taking. Judge Coleman raised a hand, silencing the room. "Officer Ruiz, I'm going to give you a chance to explain yourself. Not to me, but to Mr. Tate. Tell him why you thought he was a threat. And don't give me your academy script. Speak like a human being." Daniel's heart pounded. He wasn't prepared for this. He'd been trained to follow protocol, to write reports, to stand tall in court. But this was something else. He looked at Marcus, really looked at him, and for the first time he saw a man, not a suspect, not a threat, but a person. Marcus's hands were folded on the table, his shoulders slumped, his eyes carrying the weight of too many moments like this one. Daniel started, then stopped. The words felt heavy, like they were being pulled from somewhere deep inside him. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I saw you and I made a snap judgment. I was wrong." The admission hung in the air, raw and fragile. Marcus didn't respond, but his expression softened, just a fraction. The crowd was silent, waiting for Judge Coleman's next move. "Officer Ruiz," she said, "you're young and you're learning, but this isn't a game. Your decisions have consequences, real ones, for real people. Mr. Tate isn't a statistic. He's a man with a life, a family, a story. You took that from him, even if just for a moment. Do better." She turned to Lena. "Counselor, your motion to dismiss is granted. Mr. Tate, you're free to go." The gavel fell, sharp and final. Marcus exhaled, his shoulders relaxing as Lena gripped his arm, whispering something Daniel couldn't hear. The crowd began to disperse, but Daniel stayed rooted to the spot, his mind racing. He'd walked into this courtroom thinking he was the hero. Now he wasn't sure what he was. As Marcus stood to leave, he paused and looked back at Daniel. "You meant that apology?" he asked, his voice low. Daniel nodded, his throat tight. "Yeah, I did." Marcus studied him for a moment, then nodded back. Good. Don't let it happen again. The rest of the day was a blur. Daniel left the courthouse, the weight of his badge heavier than ever. He drove back to the precinct, past the streets he'd sworn to protect, and for the first time he really saw them, the people, the stories, the lives he'd been so quick to judge. Eastmore wasn't just a city. It was a tapestry of struggle and hope, and he'd been blind to half of it. Back at the station, his partner, Officer Sarah Kim, was waiting. She was a veteran, 10 years on the force, with a no-nonsense attitude and a knack for reading people. "Heard you got schooled by Coleman," she said, leaning against a locker. "You okay?" Daniel shrugged, unbuttoning his uniform. "I screwed up, Sarah. I thought I was doing my job, but I don't know. I saw a black guy, and I just assumed." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "You know what they say about assuming. Look, kid, you're not the first rookie to trip over your own ego. But you've got a choice now: learn from it or double down." "I want to learn," he said, and he meant it. "But how? How do I know when I'm crossing the line?" Sarah sighed, crossing her arms. "Start by listening. Not just to your training, but to people. Really hear them. You think you're protecting the community, but half the time they're scared of you. Ask yourself why." Daniel nodded, her words sinking in. He thought about Marcus, about the look in his eyes, about Judge Coleman's badge. He'd always seen the badge as a shield, a symbol of authority. But maybe it was something else, a promise, one he hadn't fully understood until now. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the courtroom scene. The moment Judge Coleman flashed her badge, the weight of Marcus's gaze. He got up, grabbed his laptop, and started searching. He found articles about Eastmore's history, redlining, riots, decades of distrust between the police and the community. He read about Judge Coleman's career, how she joined the force to change it from the inside, only to realize the system was bigger than any one person. He found Marcus's social media, saw photos of him with his sister, his niece, his Lifia life Daniel had disrupted for no good reason. By morning, Daniel was different. Not fixed, not perfect, but awake. He showed up to roll call with a new kind of focus. When his sergeant assigned him to patrol the same block where he'd arrested Marcus, he didn't flinch. He drove out, parked, and got out of the car. This time, he didn't just scan for threats. He looked at faces, nodded at passersby, even stopped to talk to a kid shooting hoops on a cracked court. "Hey, officer," the kid called, bouncing the ball. "You here to arrest me too?" Daniel winced, but he didn't look away. "Nah, man. Just here to say what's up. You got a mean jump shot." The kid grinned, skeptical but willing to play along. "Yeah? Wanna try me?" Daniel laughed, loosening his shoulders. "Maybe next time. Gotta keep the streets safe first." As he walked back to his car, Daniel felt something shift. It wasn't redemption, not yet, but it was a start. He'd made a mistake, but he wasn't going to let it define him. Eastmore was his city too, and he was going to earn its trust, one step, one conversation at a time. Daniel's shift ended with the sun dipping below Eastmore's skyline, painting the city in shades of orange and gray. He drove home, the weight of the day clinging to him like damp clothes. His apartment was small, a one-bedroom with peeling paint and a view of a brick wall, but it was his. He dropped his keys on the counter, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and sank into the couch. The courtroom scene played on a loop in his mind: Judge Coleman's badge, Marcus's disappointed eyes, the crowd's murmurs. He'd always thought being a cop meant having answers. Now he was drowning in questions. The next morning, Daniel woke with a fire in his chest. He wasn't going to let one mistake define him, but he also wasn't naive enough to think an apology fixed everything. Eastmore's problems ran deep: decades of systemic bias, economic neglect, and broken trust. He couldn't undo history, but he could start somewhere. He pulled on his uniform, the badge gleaming under the fluorescent kitchen light, and made a decision. He'd find Marcus Tate and make things right, or at least try. Finding Marcus wasn't hard. Eastmore was big, but its communities were tight-knit, and Daniel had access to the precinct's database. Marcus worked as a mechanic at a shop on 12th Street, a place called Tate's Auto owned by his uncle. Daniel drove there on his lunch break, his stomach twisting with nerves. The shop was a squat brick building with 2 open garage bays, the air thick with the smell of oil and metal. Marcus was under a beat-up sedan, wrench in hand, when Daniel walked in. "Mr. Tate," Daniel called, his voice echoing over the clank of tools. Marcus slid out from under the car, wiping his hands on a rag. His expression hardened when he saw Daniel's uniform. "You here to arrest me again, officer?" Daniel shook his head, hands raised. "No, sir. I'm here to talk. Off the record." Marcus leaned against the car, crossing his arms. "Talk then. I got work to do." Daniel took a breath, choosing his words carefully. "I messed up the other day. I saw you and I jumped to conclusions. I'm sorry. I want to understand how to do better." Marcus studied him, his eyes narrowing. "You think saying sorry fixes it? You think I haven't heard that before? Cops, judges, politicians, they all apologize when they get caught. Meanwhile, I'm the one who spent a night in a cell for standing on a damn sidewalk." Daniel felt the sting of the words but didn't look away. "I don't expect it to fix anything, but I'm here because I want to get it right. I grew up in a neighborhood like this. I thought I knew what I was doing, but I was wrong. Tell me what I don't see." Marcus laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "What you don't see. You don't see me. You see a black man, and your brain fills in the blanks: thug, dealer, whatever. You don't see the guy who's got a kid sister in college, who's trying to keep this shop running, who's tired of looking over his shoulder every time a cop car rolls by." Daniel nodded, letting the words sink in. "I hear you. I want to change that. Not just for you, but for everyone I meet out there. How do I start?" Marcus didn't answer right away. He grabbed a bottle of water from a nearby cooler and took a long sip, his eyes never leaving Daniel. Finally, he said, "You start by showing up. Not just when you're in trouble, but every day. You want trust? Earn it. Come to the community center, talk to people, listen. And don't expect a pat on the back for it." Daniel left the shop with Marcus's words echoing in his head. He didn't feel absolved, but he felt directed, like he'd been given a map to a place he'd never thought to explore. That evening, he found himself at the Eastmore Community Center, a rundown building with flickering lights and a gym that doubled as a meeting hall. A group of residents was gathered for a town hall, discussing police reform. Daniel hesitated at the door, his uniform drawing stares, but he walked in anyway. The meeting was led by a woman named Aisha Brooks, a community organizer with a voice that could command a stadium. She was mid-sentence when she spotted Daniel. "Officer, you here to listen or to talk?" she asked, her tone neutral but firm. "Listen," Daniel said, taking a seat in the back. The room buzzed with skepticism, but Aisha nodded and continued. For 2 hours, Daniel heard stories: mothers afraid for their sons, kids who crossed the street when they saw a cop, shop owners harassed over petty permits. Each story was a thread in the tapestry of Eastmore's distrust, and Daniel realized how little he'd understood his own role in it. When the meeting ended, Aisha approached him. "You're the rookie from the Tate case, aren't you?" she asked, her eyes sharp. Daniel nodded. "Yeah, I'm trying to do better." She studied him, then handed him a flyer. "We've got a youth program here, mentoring, basketball, job training. Show up, not as a cop, but as a person. Let's see if you mean it." Over the next few weeks, Daniel became a regular at the community center. He helped coach basketball, sat in on job workshops, and listened to kids talk about their dreams and fears. He didn't wear his uniform, but he didn't hide who he was either. Some people warmed to him, others kept their distance. He didn't push, he just kept showing up. One day, Marcus showed up at the center, his niece, Kayla, in tow. She was 16, all energy and attitude, with a basketball tucked under her arm. "Heard you're coaching," Marcus said, his tone neutral. "Kayla's got a mean crossover. Don't mess it up." Daniel grinned, tossing Kayla the ball. "Let's see it, then." The court became their common ground. Kayla was quick, fearless, and didn't care that Daniel was a cop. She just wanted to win. Marcus watched from the sidelines, his expression unreadable but not hostile. After practice, he pulled Daniel aside. "You're not what I expected," he said. "Keep it up, and maybe we'll talk." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was progress. Daniel felt the weight of his badge shift again, not lighter, but balanced, like he was learning how to carry it. He started seeing Eastmore differently, not as a battleground, but as a community, flawed and vibrant. He noticed the small things, the way Mrs. Alvarez at the bodega always slipped an extra piece of candy into kids' bags, the murals painted by teens on abandoned walls, the old men playing dominoes on folding tables. He started nodding to people on his patrols, learning names, asking questions. Some responded, some didn't. He kept going. But change wasn't easy. Back at the precinct, Daniel's new approach drew mixed reactions. Some officers, like Sarah, respected his effort. Others, like his sergeant, Mike Callahan, thought he was soft. "You're a cop, not a social worker," Callahan barked one morning. "You keep playing nice, you'll get yourself killed." Daniel didn't argue, but he didn't back down either. He'd seen what happened when cops stopped listening. Arrests like Marcus's, or worse. He wasn't going to be that cop anymore. The real test came 3 months later. Daniel was on patrol when a call came in. A disturbance at a protest downtown. A group of activists, led by Aisha, was marching against a recent police shooting in a neighboring city. Tensions were high, and the crowd was growing. Daniel arrived to find officers forming a line, batons ready, faces hard. The protesters chanted, their signs demanding justice, accountability, an end to the cycle of violence. Daniel recognized Aisha at the front, her megaphone blaring. He also saw Marcus, standing near the edge, holding a sign that read, "My life matters." Their eyes met, and for a moment, Daniel felt the weight of every choice he'd made since that courtroom day. Callahan was shouting orders, telling the officers to push the crowd back. Daniel hesitated. He saw the fear in the protesters' eyes, the anger, the hope. He saw Kayla in the crowd, her face defiant but nervous. He thought of Judge Coleman's badge, of Marcus's words, of the kids at the community center. "Officer Ruiz," Callahan snapped. "Move in." Daniel stepped forward, but not toward the crowd. He turned to Callahan. "Sir, we don't need to escalate this. Let me talk to them." Callahan's face reddened. "You giving orders now, rookie?" "No, sir," Daniel said, his voice steady. "I'm asking to try something different." Callahan glared but waved him off. Daniel approached Aisha, hands open, no baton. The crowd tensed, but he kept his eyes on her. "Aisha, I'm not here to fight. Can we talk? Keep this peaceful." Aisha lowered her megaphone, sizing him up. The crowd watched, silent. "You got 1 minute," she said. Daniel spoke fast, his words raw but honest. "I know you don't trust us. I get why. I've made mistakes, big ones. But I'm here and I'm listening. Tell me what you need." Aisha didn't soften, but she didn't shut him down either. "We need you to stop treating us like enemies. We need justice, not handcuffs. Can you promise that?" I can promise I'll try, Daniel said. Every day. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. Aisha nodded, and the crowd eased back, the chants resuming but less hostile. Daniel stayed, talking with protesters, listening to their stories. Callahan wasn't happy, but he didn't interfere. When the protest ended without arrests or tear gas, Daniel felt a flicker of hope. That night, he ran into Marcus at the community center. "Saw you out there," Marcus said, tossing a basketball between his hands. "You meant it, didn't you?" Daniel nodded. "Trying to." Marcus smirked. "You're still a cop. Don't forget that." "I won't," Daniel said. "But I'm more than that too." Months turned into a year. Daniel kept showing up to the center, to protests, to his patrols with a new perspective. He wasn't perfect. He still made mistakes, misread situations, let his instincts get the better of him sometimes. But he listened, learned, and apologized when he got it wrong. Eastmore didn't change overnight, but Daniel saw shifts, fewer sideways glances, more nods, even a few smiles. One day, he got a call from Judge Coleman's office. She wanted to see him. Nervous but curious, Daniel showed up at the courthouse, where she greeted him with that same piercing gaze. "I've been hearing about you, Officer Ruiz," she said. "Community center, protests, kids basketball. You're making waves." Daniel shrugged, unsure if he was in trouble. "Just trying to do better, Your Honor." She smiled, a rare thing. "You're learning. That's more than most. Keep going, and maybe you'll earn that badge yet." As he left, Daniel felt the weight of her words. He wasn't a hero, not yet, maybe not ever. But he was trying, and that was enough for now. Eastmore's scars ran deep, and Daniel knew he couldn't heal them alone. But every conversation, every game of basketball, every moment he chose to listen instead of judge was a step toward something better. He thought of Marcus, Aisha, Kayla, and Judge Coleman, people who'd shown him what justice could look like. Not just in a courtroom, but in the streets, in the community, in the quiet moments of connection. What do you think? Where does justice start, and who gets to define it? Share your thoughts, because in a city like Eastmore, every voice matters.